Okay, so for models who have other full-time professions, how can they use their modeling experience to help them in their careers?
So I can answer this question. So first of all, I think it's amazing when people have different things going on outside of modeling. And like I mentioned earlier, clients are looking for that. The amount of times I've gone to a casting in New York City and the sign-in sheet asks me, okay, what's your age, your name, and then what do you like to do, not modeling related. So whether that be a hobby, that be something creative, maybe you're an artist, a musician, or that might be maybe a side business that you have that you're really passionate about. I think it's really important to continue pursuing that alongside modeling because clients are looking for somebody who, again, like I said, is multidimensional. They don't want someone who's only, thing they want to do is model and that's all they want to do. It's like they're not interested in that anymore, unfortunately. If that's how you've been able to trudge along this whole time, they want people who are doing other things. And to that, I say there's a ton of transferable skills you learn in your modeling career, whether that be consumer behavior, you're a skilled multitasker, you're highly adaptable, you're able to anticipate the needs of clients. You're a skilled storyteller, you build brand awareness. There's so many things you learn on set. And so I'd say just reflect and take the time to learn what those things may be. And the other thing that really adds value to you as a professional is your vast network. So I'm sure there are some people in maybe your full-time job who don't have access to your contacts who are in the fashion modeling industry. And you could really use that to your advantage and connect those people because you never know what the possibilities may be. And so make sure to never take that for granted, especially now where everyone's trying to pivot and transition and figure out what their plan is for the next few years. So there's a lot of opportunity in modeling to grow and to also help you grow in other industries because of who you know and the skills that you've developed.
Yeah, and I think, employers too, in general, particularly for sort of for when they're looking for sort of positions which are more sort of early career, they're not particularly interested in specific skill sets. What they're interested in is sort of mindsets and behavioral competencies like Renée was talking about. The thing as a model is that you've got an amazing set of those. When you think about it, you've got, sort of ambition, competitiveness, discipline, resilience, communication. You started modeling young, you've built those skills in a very tough environment. You're popping out at 25, the age that a lot of people are looking around for their first job, having done a whole career. And if someone like that came to me, then as an employer, that's deeply impressive. So think of it in that terms as well. Really sort of think about what you can bring to the table in terms of those sort of mindsets and also that sort of life experience, that maturity as well.
I love that. Thank you. Unfortunately, models can be competitive and that can breed a toxic culture. How can models support one another and build each other up in this industry? So there's twofold. So what factors should model consider most when deciding to work with an agency or brand? And I believe that is for you, Elizabeth. And that first question, so unfortunately, how can models support one another? That's for you, Sundran.
Okay, shall I go first with that first question then, Elizabeth?
Yeah, you go first.
So I think there's two sort of big red flag words there, competition and toxicity. So I think the first thing is competition is good. Competition is really good. It's what made the world great. It's what hones your skills. It's what makes you successful. It's what gets you to claw your way to the top and enjoy all the benefits of that. So competition's big thumbs up. But toxicity is a different question altogether. So and toxicity in modeling, a large part of that arises from, I believe, or RTM believes from our research, from this unhealthy dynamic where model agencies and brands are encouraging models to have this weak position by competing against themselves as well. So it's to their benefit. So bear that in mind when you're thinking about it. Competition can be healthy and it doesn't have to be toxic as well. So how can you do that? Well, firstly, be as competitive as an individual, be as competitive as you can be. But make sure, getting back to Elizabeth's point about character, make sure you have a clear idea of what lines you're not going to cross. What ethical lines you're not going to cross. If you follow that, if you role model that, people will see that. The models around you will see that. They will admire you for that. They will respect you for that. And you'll respect yourself, because you may do something for a short-term gain at this point in time, but you're also developing the sort of person you want to be in 20 years' time. And what you do now is going to really inform that as well. So be competitive, but be ethical when you're being competitive. Secondly, is that it's perfectly fine to be friends with your competitors. I work with one of the most amazingly competitive organizations in the world. Top 1% of sort of graduates went there. They all wanted to be CEOs of the world's largest companies. People got on because we had those lines in place and because we had a strong culture of collaboration as well. And if you don't believe that models do collaborate, at least from our research and from Elizabeth's experience, they're super keen to coach and mentor people as well, particularly models who've been there for a while. From some of our research, models talk about this rite of passage in the first year or two, where people really don't know the industry, they fall into a lot of traps, they end up sort of being preyed upon and so forth. And they're telling us, look, what we really need to do is we need to sort of organize ourselves, or we need to reach out to models to help them in that period as well. And so there are people out there who you may consider to be competitors who are going to be your friends and your colleagues and your collaborators as well.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to tell a story about Arizona Muse. She won't mind if I tell this, because I'm sure she'd tell you herself if she was here. But when she got into the, she's a sort of quite a famous model, but when she was starting out, obviously, she was doing the rounds like everybody else, and she felt that she couldn't speak to the other models that she was with, waiting, because her agency had really encouraged her not to talk to the other models, and I think agencies discourage you from talking to other models, because then you won't talk about pricing, you won't talk about what's happening to you, and therefore it keeps you unaware of what's going on, with other models and with the rest of the world. So that feeds this unhealthy, toxic, if you like, competition. And so anyway, she was waiting in a corridor in a thong, waiting with 25 other, models, waiting to go through a door to be basically, approved of by 5 men sitting behind a desk. And every single model there was terrified, every single one. And she stood there and she was kind of covering herself and feeling really, really naked and upset. And she turned to one of the models and she went, "Oh my goodness, this is awful. I just feel embarrassed." And the girl turned around and said, "Oh, I'm so glad you spoke to me. I agree. It's horrible, isn't it?" And she said from that moment on, they all began talking, and it became a bit of a laugh, and they turned it into a bit of a game. And suddenly all this kind of like fear of not speaking to your competitor and everything like this, it all dissipated, and everyone actually ended up enjoying it as much as you can if you're sitting in a thong waiting to be, So I'm just saying that sometimes in awkward situations, if you're the first one to break the silence, it can be a good thing.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my unmute. But yes, I totally agree. And that's a great story. So just back to your question, Elizabeth, what factors should model consider when deciding to work with an agency or a brand?
Oh, this is actually quite a hard question. But I did think about it, and I was thinking to myself, if I was a model and a brand and I was looking for an agency to represent me, which is what you're doing, one of the ways I'd find out actually how nurturing that agency was and how serious they were about my career is by looking at the contract, because that contract will let you know how you're going to be paid, if they're going to bind you in and not let you have any other work, how easy it is to break if they behave badly. Those are sorts of things that you really need to consider, because they're representing you. You're paying them a fee. You pay them quite a big chunk of your salary, and you need to actually go and think to yourself, do I want them representing me? are they going to treat me well? Because I'm actually handing over quite a lot of cash to them. So I would go in as a business person and look at that contract and think to yourself, is this person, is this agency going to represent me well? Am I going to feel comfortable and safe with them? And then I suppose the next thing is to, to look at also at the agency and see, if you've decided that you're going to be that sporty person, do they actually represent Reebok and Nike, or do you want to be kind of, or Burberry, or do you want to be, another sort of, Michael Halpern, or do you want to be, I don't know, Ralph Lauren or Ralph and Russo, for example, which is just couture? Where are you, and do they represent them? And that would be, the follow-up I would do. So those, I suppose, are my two tips for looking at agencies.
Thank you. And here's another question. I feel like I'm starting in the modeling industry late, and I don't know a lot about fashion as a model who started in their teens, and I want to catch up, but don't know where to start. So how can I start if I'm starting late? And I think this is for both of you.
Yeah, so there's honestly this whole, I don't know how it started, but starting late, I don't know. Nowadays, that doesn't really mean anything. Like when I first started modeling when I was 13, 14, I thought I was only going to model until I was 25, and I turned 27 tomorrow. And I have a lot of friends who actually didn't start modeling in a large, big market until they were graduating from graduate school or undergrad. So a lot of people now are starting later on, quote unquote. So 23, 24. And I really think age doesn't really matter anymore. I think the industry has become a little bit more age inclusive, honestly. And there's a lot of clients for every single stage in your career. There were clients I worked with when I was from 14 through 21 that, served a certain audience. And now I work with a totally different type of clients because of the age I'm at and what I look like now. So I don't think you should let your age hold you back, because it's not an issue as much as you think it might be, as much as maybe some people who've been in the industry for 40 years, maybe when they started it was like that. But in 2020, age doesn't really matter. I think if you take care of yourself and you look great and you have things going on for yourself, you're ambitious and you have a good social media presence, it shouldn't be an issue.
Thank you. So we actually have two more questions. So this question is, how did you learn more about the industry after coming in to another career? And that is for Elizabeth and Sundran.
Oh, hi. Well, I learned about the industry because, the British Fashion Council asked me to do a diet for models, but I'd already written 4 diets books. And I was thinking, well, what is there that I need to know? So I actually spent 1.5 years researching people, just, researching the industry, rather just ringing people up and saying, hi, I just, want to know a little bit more about what you do as a photographer, or what you do as a stylist, or what you do as, as a brand, how do you get going? And then talk to some of the schools. And that's how I really got into the industry. I really began to just read about it and reach out to everybody. I spoke to absolutely everybody, regardless of country. So people in America and France and Italy, Canada, England. And I just spent about 1.5 years talking to people. That's how I really got into it. But I was being very specific about what I wanted to find out, because I wanted to know in their jobs, how they felt the industry was going, and if they felt that there was some kind of, if there was standards that could be put in place that would make it better, if they did see things that shouldn't be there systemically. So that was kind of how I got into it. Sundran?
So I think, so Elizabeth's had much more experience in the industry. I'm still sort of wandering around dazed and confused, but I think there's a sort of a cyclical model which I use, which is basically you come in with a set of ideas, maybe biases or hypotheses, often theoretical, often what you've learned from other industries and so forth. And the really cool thing is you just start talking to people and you refine your ideas as you go along. And that's essentially been our consultation process. We've gone from very basic things like, what are abuses? Why do they occur? Right now to a point where we think we've got a very good set of solutions that we hope we can sort of really change things as well. And so I think that's been a really rich process to go there. And the really important thing is to talk to the people who are actually in the industry and who are working in the industry and really spend time with them. Don't do surveys and so on like that. Really sit down and really understand and unpick their experiences and their insights. And that's been tremendous.
It's kind of what Renée is saying. It's like, by the way, when you make contact, like really talk to that person, isn't it, Renée? I mean, that's what you're basically saying, because every contact you make is important. And actually, if you're interested in them, and you learn, you ask the right questions, they'll remember you, won't they? Renée, don't you think?
Yes, definitely. It's definitely who you know most times rather than what castings you go to or what agency you're signed with. Of course, a really great agency and an amazing booker that believes in you, and then everything kind of aligning up. But sometimes you need to create your own opportunity. And that comes from really building strong relationships with people you've maybe met on set, makeup artists, maybe a photographer that you like, or just maybe a fashion designer that you've become close with. It's really important to nurture those relationships because you don't know what they have coming up or who they know that could possibly, offer you in a really amazing job, campaign, photo shoot, whatever it may be. It's really important to keep those relationships close.
Thank you. And the last question is, do you have any advice for new models?
I wrote down some points here just so I wouldn't miss anything. I have quite a few things that I wish I had known coming into the modeling industry and even entering a larger market like New York City. And so first things first, obviously, is to know your rights. So follow groups like Responsible Trust for Models and keep in contact with them with any questions you may have. There is a New York and LA based workers' rights association called Models Alliance or Model Alliance, more specifically, and they do really amazing things when it comes to passing workers' rights laws. So definitely follow them on social media and keep up with their latest efforts. I think that's really important. Definitely, if you haven't already, find a reputable agency. And I often suggest models.com. They have a whole glossary based on city and based on tiers of different modeling agencies around the world. And so that way, you're finding people who are legitimate. And from there, the process to choose is a bit easier. And definitely do your research. Like we've been mentioning throughout this whole Zoom panel, figure out what kind of business you are, meaning what kind of model you want to be, whether it be a fashion model, commercial model, something in between, and clients you really want to work for, because when you meet with those agencies to get signed, they're going to be impressed with that you already have a business plan in place and you already know what you want to go after because they want to get to know you. It makes their job a lot easier. And also, like we were just talking about, nurture your existing relationships, reach out to other models, maybe that you follow on Instagram or you have a mutual friend, take them out for coffee and ask them questions about the industry you're not really, you haven't been able to ask other people, so you can actually get good advice without having to figure things out along the way on your own and kind of stumble. Definitely ask people who've been in the agency. The industry for a long time, what kind of advice they have when it comes to buying an agency, working with photographers, working with clients, and trying to be the best model you could possibly be. And then also continuously educate yourself. So follow different media sources like Business of Fashion or Vogue Business to kind of see what's happening in the industry right now. Sarah Ziff, the founder of Model Alliance, actually was interviewed by Business of Fashion this week to talk about what's going to happen going forward in the modeling industry, especially during the pandemic, as well as a friend of mine, Shivani Prasad. She wrote an article about how models are coping with working right now during the pandemic for Vogue Business. So it's just really important for you to educate yourself and be up to date with latest practices and what people are doing so you can kind of stay ready and be prepared.
Thank you so much, everyone. And honestly, that actually concludes our questions.
I actually had one more quick audience question if you guys have time. If you need to run, then we can cut it, but I would love to hear your answer if you have a moment. Someone submitted, as you mentioned, as a model, we're a brand. How do we balance being a brand and being a person?
Well, I think if you're a brand, that's business. And I don't think that you should, well, I mean, personally, I think you have to keep the two very, very separate, because I think that's when you can get really hurt online, because if you make it too personal, then you feel that it's a personal attack. And the point of being a brand is that you can distance yourself from it. So, I think you still need to know what your hard lines are. In other words, do you believe, are you okay with, smoking campaigns or animal rights, or where are your stance on sustainability and things like that? And if that's very, very important to you, then you should show that absolutely 100%. But when it gets too personal, like, maybe you're showing your baby or showing your husband or your parents or something like that, I would stop at that, because that can then become a personal attack. So that's how I would divide it. But Renée, you're front line on this. You're muted.
Sorry, thank you very much. Sorry about that. So yes, for me, it's very interesting because when I first started modeling, social media wasn't even a thing. It wasn't something that I was encouraged to work on, build this digital presence. And so I think what I've noticed for myself and for my friends is if you need to compartmentalize the two, maybe have a private Instagram account for yourself, your family or friends, keep it very close and closed off. And then have a more public persona where you, like Sundran and Elizabeth are speaking about, treat it as a business. Maybe you have a social media calendar, you're going to post twice a week, and it really engage with your audience. And then when you're done with that, you engage a little bit, you do what you need to do, you can log off and kind of separate yourself from that and just focus on the people that are in your inner circle. I think it's important to kind of have a separation, because for myself personally, for the first few years I was on Instagram, I had a private account. I didn't accept anybody. I was still learning about what it meant to be a quote unquote public figure as a model on social media, because you do want to protect yourself. So for that, I do say to, instead of, making it private and kind of setting yourself back when it comes to promoting yourself, just have a separate private account where you can really express yourself. So you have the public persona of you as a model, and then the private persona, which is only something you open up to people you truly trust, and you can kind of separate yourself and log out when you need like a mental health break.
I think that compartmentalization is really important, but also this is a problem which isn't just with models too. I mean, the workforce is changing dramatically over the last couple of decades. People are struggling with this concept of 24/7 work, and I think that idea of compartmentalization, but also stakes in the ground which you don't compromise on. And that might be breakfast with your son or with your spouse on a Sunday morning for a few hours, or switching off your phone and your social media on a Friday night to watch a movie, or to make sure that you go and see your friends for dinner once a month rather than canceling. Or it could be weird things. I work with a guy who, whenever he went overseas, he insisted he went riding on a horse somewhere, preferably on a beach. Just stuff like that. That keeps you as a person, and allows you to spend as much time as you want to as a business, but knowing that you're going to be sustained by your personal side as well.
Thank you guys for answering that additional question.